I'm going to talk to you later.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to talk to you later.
But if the wife want to come up to, or any of the single women or anything, you're welcome.
Now,
to.
with the imagery
It's
with that
okay.
too, something I thought about, and this is still we're doing what we can based on scripture, literature, traditions that exist. Okay, we just talked about the women; they could see from above. The men would come through into the court, but what else happened? The women made offerings whenever they had birth to be clean, and that offering they went up to the sota spot, to the side door, not up the steps, down low. Wait, I've got it right here. Duh. Let's go look. And they would lean through the door and put their hand on the head of the offering for that child. 8 days male, 14 days female, or whatever it was, right? So she'd be leaning through that door right there, putting her hand on the offering so that her child, and Yeshua would be sitting on the throne right there. Right there. A woman is doing the quote-unquote sin offering, right? For doing the most holy, beautiful thing of bringing life.
Hebrews is talking about, like,
right there, he'll
Yeshua,
sit.
that he's not going to serve as a high priest.
He's a
That's
king.
That's not his protocol. He's a king. The king sits there.
That's where David sat.
Nobody else is going to sit in that area. The king is the only one that's allowed to sit.
And he certainly isn't going to sit up there.
If you went in there and sat down,
you're dead.
Not going to go well for you. See, that's the protocol that we have to understand. And this is where the Messiah, Yeshua, the mainstream has taken him completely out of his role and made it something completely different. That is not according to Torah or any of Scripture. There's protocol. Even for him, there's protocol.
There's protocol right there, boss.
He is not the Father.
He desires mercy, but you die if you walk past that deck of card-sized stone box.
Right. Yeah.
There would be. Now, that is a beautiful concept. However, obviously, not everyone's of the able same body. This is why they did implement the oops, we ended up in a weighing room. They have the standing prayer done traditionally standing to remember just that we should be standing. It's a good idea if you want to. I'm absolutely not going to fault that. However, there were places to sit. There were just also different times to sit. The side rooms in the walls is where you would take your peace offering, no different than to the oneg room. People would excuse themselves from service if they were sitting there observing and they needed to sit, your feet were hurting, they'd go excuse themselves to somewhere they could, or if you had to use the restroom, you would digress in levels of holiness out of the temple, take care of business, mikvah, re-aliyah up back into the temple.
There was no restroom inside of the temple proper.
No, it was. I could take you to one about 4 stories down underneath that corner over there.
Right.
The throne of dignity.
That's the throne of dignity, and it was only for the priests. The rest of them were outside.
Well, it wasn't in
and
the
beyond.
temple. It was under
It was
the temple.
under.
They were beneath arches. It was separate.
Right.
How about sick people? They were able to come?
Well, I'd say it depends on your sickness. If it was leprosy,
Yeah.
you better be coming to get, because you're cured and you're coming to get the treatment. To be examined by 500, to be examined by a priest in Jerusalem. He'll probably come to you, in fact, in your home, because they need to find out, is this illness on them? Is this illness on their walls? Is this illness on their clothes? Because it's the spiritual illness of leprosy, which, yes, does have a physical manifestation in flesh, but it's spiritual. That's why it can infect from leather to stone to flesh. So it is I bet, and as a medical doctor, I bet that is fun for you to ponder. But it is spiritual medicine is the best way I can try to describe it. Because yes, there's the physical disease.
But there were doctors on staff in the temple. There
Yes.
were priests and Levites, right? And because they had medical conditions too. During Pesach, there would be 2,500 or so, Levites and priests serving.
Talk about the offerings.
2,500. And they lived a life where they didn't eat meat every day. So imagine you being a doctor would understand. You come, you haven't eaten meat in months, and now all of a sudden you're consuming meat at every meal.
Gorging on meat.
You know what is happening to your stomach? Yeah, it wasn't good. It wasn't good. So they were there, but they couldn't. They were not serving in here. There was chambers for that, for the Levites and the priests.
But as far as the standing prayer, yes. And if you're in the court of the women in the temple proper, yeah, you best be standing, maybe even dancing. But also we forget too that people would prostrate. It wouldn't be inappropriate to sit. No, to sit and rest like this. No. You really shouldn't do that. And so a lot of parts in our liturgy where we do sit, a lot of times people raise eyebrows because we kind of have some of that that Christianity influence a little bit where this is the position of worship. I'm not funning nobody. We're not on the internet. I can show you that position on every sun temple on this planet. It's warm. Now, I'm not saying don't raise or try to receive from Father. I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to fund that, but that is the source of it on Sunday worship, worshiping the Son who replaced the Father. Like that's the mantra of the Christianity Son God falseness. So as far as the need to stand, you must do this. That's kind of like the hand washing with bread. I'm like, I don't mind if you do that. But the people who say you must are people that are typically doing stuff with the word S-U-N, sun, in front of it. Sunday worship, Sunday stuff. There are suns on the walls of all of the Catholic stuff. Up in the front and center, a big burning sun. There's a reason we avoid any imagery that would look like a sun. In fact, you want to see something terrible? Look at the Temple app. That is a false file. They want it to just look like a Milky Way. That is a placeholder. Joe hates that sun and moon so much. That is not. It's a galaxy of stars is what the description of the veil is. The programmers weren't there yet. The first programmer, who was just some clown, put a phoenix on there like, we can't have that. It's supposed to be like the fun in space and stuff. They're like, how about a mountain with the planet? Fine. So that's programmer garbage, okay? Don't let that infect you. Don't let that through your gates the wrong way. But no imagery of sun and moon and stars like that, where their specific bodies would be appropriate. So the idea of that sun worship, so if you feel the need, like it's only when you're standing, it's like, why? Is it because you're facing the sun and you close your eyes? I did it myself. Feel the warmth. You could close your eyes and imagine a ball of fire, and you're basking in this radiance. Where's this imagery in Torah? Nadab and Abihu basked in his radiance. It looks like this. So I would caution that whenever we're looking at it, what's the point? What's the motive and intent? Sit, stand, jump on your head, doesn't matter. Are you unified? This is the concept of that sit. It's more of a kneel. The reason they settled on sitting in a synagogue is because not everybody has the same hips and knees. And so no different than in the priest times, the times of the temple, they had them tripping over each other, breaking legs to race to see, I won, I get to do this service. I won, I get to do that service. They're like, okay, look, guys, you're killing each other. You're going to end up on the cripple bench up here where you're deformed and you can't do service no more. So we're going to draw lots, okay? And then we'll see who is doing the fire in the morning and who's doing this, who's doing that. That's how desirous they were to race to service. The zeal. Yeah. And it needed tempered. So in that same concept, are we going to race in and trip our own feet and each other's, or are we going to do it in a unified, orderly fashion with purpose, motive, and intent to glorify Father first? So the same concept has never stopped. You know what I mean? It goes through the ages. So you're in the 1600s, and now you've got the rabbis' times. I'm going to do this with my back over here, and the people are like, okay, well, I'm not. Poor old Mr. McGillicuddy, he wants to feel holy too. Help! Get me up! Pick me up! You had old boys having to get lifted up off the ground because they love Father. They wanted to be just as pious as they've always been their whole life. They allow them to sit in the synagogues. Our quaking bad knees can do it. You talk about the service in the temple. We have the order of when you're up to 25, you're not serving. From 25 to 50, you are serving. And from 50 to 75, once again, you're not serving. You're leading. We've seen it a couple times where we've had some folks that were above the 50 number, and we'll have them do a Torah walk, and sometimes it almost goes slightly awry. And I'm not judging or condemning, but what do you know? Father has order. You're going to limp your way up the altar with a bad hip after you're 60 years old holding a 60-pound cut of beef? There's a time and a place for every person in the order of the service. It's beautiful. We're at 17:16, so
Any
we've
other-
got
any other
15 minutes
questions?
tops. But
Any other
yeah,
questions?
this is, like I said, I want people to ask what you don't know about with the traditions or the locations, because the entirety of the liturgy service is going through the 10 levels of Aliyah, approaching Father in holiness up to the Amidah. And then you take your steps backward, and you're stepping back through the veil to the court of the men. Stepping backward. Aliyah, levels of holiness. So earth is level 0. Jerusalem's level 1. The temple mountain is level 2. The inside of the 500 by 500 is level 3. You come into the court of the women, it's level 4. It's not, now these levels aren't defined. It's easy to relate terms. But as you go through each of these, you are approaching a higher level of holiness.
So it's like when you're out in the parking lot, you come into the foyer. You see what I'm saying? Then you come into the court of the women. Then you come into the court of Israel. You know, so those are levels of Aliyah, basically.
And now you shouldn't spit anywhere, but if you were going to spit somewhere, where are you going to spit? Are you going to spit here on the floor or out there in the parking lot?
Right.
You know, there's different behaviors for different places. Sin has no place in any level of Aliyah. But there are levels of holiness required, lest you find yourself in sin and death, to approach these high places, normally being a priest, being a Levite, or being called to make your offering where you were called to make it. But those levels of holiness, we mentally are going through the liturgy and approaching similarly. To where, for me, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, now, men walk forward, great. Well, the reason you guys don't see me clap much is because I have a microphone on my head, and I went to college for 7 years for music, and I was taught if you clap with a microphone, I will beat you. You don't want to hear my body shaking. It's just not right. It's inappropriate protocol. If I didn't have that microphone and I was, once Aiden takes over and I'm not on that microphone no more, yes, I will be clapping more and dancing more. I might get to go sit on the cajon. But it's not appropriate for me to try to be in 7 stations at once. We've done the one-man band game. You want some laughs, go look at some of the old YouTube videos. It's not good. But, so that said, if someone feels motivated to stand back and dance and hit the tambourine, that doesn't mean you're any less. If you stand back here and dance versus if you stand up there serious and solemn or whatever during the Amidah, we're echad in it. It's the difference between unity and unison. Unison would be we march like robots, all of us side by side, insert bowing, like it just be a lock and step. He doesn't care about that. They did that. They offered all sorts of unison with no unity. That was part of why their offerings were vain.
Which becomes mechanical.
Mechanical,
Which
heartless.
is no
So their heart is kneeling, bowing right alongside mine. That's the unity he wants. Everyone wants to talk about the gifts of the other room. We were talking about flopping around on the floor. Okay, yeah, that's a seizure and demonic possession. God doesn't gift you with chaos. But everyone wants to talk about those gifts of translation or a healing or a vision, a word. Oh, that's great. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. He's done that through the Torah lots and lots. What came before? They were worshiping with one accord. They were united in heart before Father. And he's like, oh yeah, count me in. And he descended in that room. So how do you get there? All right, let's throw all the opinions in the hat. What are we going to do next week so that we get there? We'll have 20,000 things to do. We submit ourselves to his will. We see the order in his word. We've seen him establish a physical priesthood and protocol. If he had never made a temple with no service, with no order of how to approach and worship him, well then sure, whatever music bangs the best and makes your heart beat the fastest and is the most exciting would be the absolute right answer every time, hands down, bar none. But he gave order. Order amidst chaos. People uniting, getting rid of their own desires. Who wants to come kill animals together and burn them and not eat half of it and take Saturday to not mow the lawn and take care of your animals and do everything you want to do? Who wants to do this? This is not a natural thing. This is not an animal thing. We are going against our animal nature to show glory to Father. How do we do that? We take the chaos that is man and relationship, and we bring order and intention to it. So what is liturgy? His words back to him that define him and our relationship to him, but the performance thereof and the rituals or the traditions we do together are simply the tools by which we display our unity. It's opportunity for unity. That's all. It's not right because we bowed left and right and center. But if one bows this way, one bows that way, two people do a pogo stick jump all at the same time, I do know he doesn't like that. But keep your hearts united, and we will move as a flock, a herd. He calls us a flock. Whether you're the goats or the sheep, you're a flock and you're a herd. You're going to move as a unit.
The visitor we had earlier today, he was in town for a conference, and he heard that we were, we had a what's that? That we were a little more traditional, and so he was looking for that. So he actually knew all of the liturgy, was singing along, going through, and when it come to the silent prayer, which Anthony says out loud, he whips back like, "What are you doing?" Because he knew the protocol. Our protocol is slightly different than some of the other protocol. It's not as, we've made some exceptions to that. But see, that's the idea of protocol. Now, wouldn't it be cool that if every whatever messianic or whatever label you want to put on it, congregation, no matter whether you were in Ohio or California or wherever, that you could just stop in and you could just slide right in and know exactly what's going on and be able to worship the Father. That's the idea behind what we're trying to achieve. So that we have some consistency, so that the brothers down the road in the next state, in the next country, we're worshiping together before the Father. Because could you imagine, as a parent, right, you love nothing more than to see the children playing together and getting along. When they're all bickering and fighting and, digging at each other, then it's just frustrating. So imagine what he's thinking when he looks down on us and sees everybody bickering and fighting and everybody's trying to do it their own way and wants their own rules and all this stuff. I don't have a dog in that fight. I don't want to. Like, Father, just tell me.
I don't want him to be right. I want him to be right.
And guess what? Brother Judah's been doing it for a long time, certain ways. I'm not agreeing with everything that they do. I'm not saying, right, exactly. They carry the scepter. It's like the least I can do is try to learn and understand and be somewhat close to what they're doing. And I'm okay with that. I'm good with that, right? I have a reason behind it. I'm not just doing it because I want to be different or because I want to be like them, or has nothing to do with that. I just want some unity in the body as a whole so that we have some consistency. Yes. Did you have a question?
Why are there so many levels in the
Aliyahs, the different levels
Yeah.
as you come up?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So the whole system of the aliyahs and the levels of holiness, we got to remember, is mostly a metaphor for how men came up with that system, because even we assume it's within the design that was given, because he inspired the design of the temple and the tabernacle into people throughout Scripture. And we see them design it and make it. So we don't have the direct information, but we can, to an extent, assume that he gave them that information too about this area is holy, that's not. The first most basic example is like when Moses goes up to the burning bush, he says, hey, come forward, but take your shoes off, the area is holy. So he was coming from normal dirt to holy dirt, set apart for whatever reason, because Father said so. This was a special place. It's where he laid his name. So with the temple, why so many levels? Well, that's many levels of protection for us. There's another checkpoint, if you will, to make sure that you are safe as you go forward. So you come up to, you come from outside of the, in the normal world, you come to Jerusalem. Well, as I'm approaching Jerusalem, if I'm approaching for the purpose to go to the temple and worship, I'm going to be thinking, I should definitely do away with some worldly thoughts. What habits have I failed to break? I'd be reflecting on myself, trying to improve a little bit. And then when you first get to Jerusalem, there's going to be mikvahs everywhere. You could submerge. And that's a wonderful tradition and also command, and sometimes, to Again, think about washing your mind and heart. No different than the hand washing, the traditional hand washing. It ain't about cleaning your hands. I hope your hands were clean before you came to Shabbat of dirt, you know. It's about mentally thinking, because it takes constant remembering to not forget and to not be afraid, to stay in a good, healthy state. So the whole setup with all those levels is just to remind us just how holy Father is. You know, we say there's 10-ish levels with the temple. There could be 1,000,000 steps, and we'd never reach Father's feet. You know, this is just a metaphor, really. It's just something for us to understand that as we approach Father, we will have more and more rules. You know, if we want to go start a campfire with some strange fire right now and roast a hot dog on it, no big deal, except we're cooking on Shabbat, other than Shabbat. Now, if you want to go and take that same raw fire and offer an offering to Father with it, he said no. You know, so you'd take that fire to Jerusalem, up the stairs, through the doors, past the guards, to the altar. You wouldn't make it that far. Chances are, by the time you got to the edge of the city, you'd be like, what's that? You got a fire? That looks like an incense holder. What are you doing with that? Oh, I'm going to go make an offering to Father. No, you're not. You'd be protected right there, because not only is that area itself being defined a matter of safety, the people who adhere to those rules, who follow the Torah, who want to protect the holiness of Father, they're part of that. You've got priests at this level. Levites are here, and there's human beings at every level except once a year at the top level in the temple, if you want to get technical with the Yom Kippur, you know. Other than that, but it's really just a picture for us to understand that we should always be trying to sharpen up and do a little better as we approach and to try to attain higher levels of being one with Father's Word. Oh, I didn't. What's rumbling? Oh, motorcycle. Okay, but yeah, does that help, or am I in the right area code?
Does that make sense?
Okay, good.
It's levels of protection too. So when you go home, and you probably you can run in the backyard, right, and play and run and play and kick balls and everything outside. But when you come in the house, can you? No, because there's rules of protection, right? Right. Now you can go in the kitchen and get a drink of water, but you can't play with all the utensils and appliances and everything else, right? Because that's a level of protection. So those rules are set up to protect you. Imagine if everybody in the world came to Jerusalem and everybody went in to surround the altar. It would be chaos. People would die. There would be bad things happen because there's so many people, right? So it's the same thing. It's levels of protection, just like your mom, you know, has levels of protection for you at home so that you can stay safe. Does that make sense? Okay. Any last questions, thoughts? We're good? Yeah. Yeah, but I want to continue. Think about it, though, and as we go through the service each week, you know, think about, you know, jot down some notes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, as I've shared, and maybe not with some of those that have come more recently, but, you know, when my rabbi first put a tallit on me, I felt really awkward. Like, I was like, what in the world? Yeah, and so I wore it out of respect for him, but I really didn't understand why I was wearing it until I wore it for a while. And then all of a sudden I was there once without it, and I felt naked. Yeah. And it was like, oh my goodness, because my protocol had changed. And so, you know, that's like a prayer closet. When Yeshua says go to your closet to pray before the Father, that's your tallit. What they didn't have closets in Jerusalem then, right? I mean, if they had 2 or 3 garments, you know, that was some of them one. They had 1 or 2 garments. You know, I mean, they didn't have closets. So he wasn't talking about some separate room. That room you carried with you, that was your tallit. That was your prayer closet, right? So, you know, and it was really awkward for me. When I first started walking the Torah, that was